For 5 years, Liam had performed the same ritual on the first of every month. He would sit at the heavy oak desk in his study, the one he and Clara had chosen together, and write a check. The name was always the same, Chloe Anderson. The amount never varied, $500. He would fold it neatly, slide it into a plain white envelope, and place a stamp in the top right corner with methodical precision. He thought of it as a sacrament, a quiet promise kept to the woman who was no longer there to see it. He believed it was an act of charity, a lifeline to his late wife's younger sister, who, by all accounts, was struggling to stay afloat in a world that had always seemed to overwhelm her. He didn't know it was the price of admission to his own humiliation. He didn't know the money wasn't a lifeline, but fuel for a fire of arrogance and deceit. A fire he was about to extinguish with a flood of cold, hard truth. But before we dive into this story of quiet patience and devastating revelation, we'd love to know where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Let us know your city or country in the comments below. Your support means the world to us. And if you enjoy what you see, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories just like this one. Now let's return to Liam and the dinner that would change everything. The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary hung heavy in the air, a cloying richness that seemed to coat the back of Liam's throat. He sat at the polished mahogany dining table in Chloe and Mark's home, a sprawling testament to modern minimalist design that always felt more like a showroom than a place where people actually lived. The wine in his glass, a deep, blood-red Cabernet, was probably worth more than his entire grocery bill for the week. Mark, his brother-in-law, swirled his own glass with an air of practiced connoisseurship, the chunky gold watch on his wrist catching the light from the ridiculously complex chandelier overhead. "You know, Liam," Mark began, his voice smooth and laced with a condescension so ingrained it was simply part of his accent, "we really do appreciate you coming to these little family dinners. It must be nice for you to get out of that quiet little house of yours." Liam offered a small, non-committal smile. His house wasn't little, and it wasn't quiet in a lonely way. It was peaceful. It was filled with memories of Clara, with the scent of old books and brewing tea. It was a sanctuary. To Mark, anything that wasn't ostentatious was pitiable. Chloe, his wife's sister, chimed in, her voice a higher-pitched echo of her husband's dismissiveness. "Oh, Mark, be nice. We love having Liam over. Besides," she added, giving Liam a look that was meant to be sympathetic, but landed as deeply patronizing, "we know how important family is to you, especially after, well, you know." She let the sentence hang, the ghost of Clara filling the space between them. It was her favorite weapon against him. The invocation of her sister's memory was a shield for her cruelty, a way to frame her insults as concern. Liam felt the familiar, dull ache behind his ribs. He did this for Clara. He endured this for Clara. That's what he told himself. "It's my pleasure," Liam said, his voice even and calm. He had long ago perfected the art of absorbing their barbs without showing a flicker of emotion. Reacting was what they wanted. It would confirm their belief in his weakness, in his simple, emotional nature. The dinner continued in the same vein. Mark pontificated about a recent stock market win, using jargon designed to exclude and impress. Chloe detailed their plans for a summer trip to Tuscany, lamenting the absolute nightmare of finding a villa with a saltwater infinity pool. At no point did they ask Liam about his life, his work, or his well-being. He was not a participant in their conversation. He was an audience, a prop to make them feel grander by comparison. As the evening wound down and Liam was preparing to leave, Chloe touched his arm, her expression one of practiced gratitude. "Liam, thank you again for, your little contribution this month. It really does help us bridge the gaps. Things are just so tight right now." She said it loudly enough for Mark to hear, a piece of theater for an audience of one. Mark nodded gravely. "Every little bit helps. We're fighters, but it's a tough world out there. Liam reached into the inner pocket of his simple tweed jacket. He pulled out the plain white envelope. Inside was not a check this time, but 5 crisp $100 bills. He had stopped by the bank specifically. Sometimes he liked to feel the physical weight of his promise. He handed it to Chloe. Her fingers, adorned with a diamond ring that could have paid his property taxes for a decade, closed around the thin envelope. "You're a good man, Liam," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Clara would be so proud of how you've looked after me." Driving home through the quiet, tree-lined streets of his own neighborhood, Liam didn't feel like a good man. He felt like a fool. A strange, cold feeling was beginning to curdle in his gut, a feeling he had been suppressing for months, even years. He glanced at the passenger seat, half expecting to see Clara there, her warm smile reassuring him. But the seat was empty. The promise he had made was to a memory, and he was beginning to wonder if he even remembered the promise correctly. He parked his modest but reliable sedan in the driveway of his home, a charming 2-story brick house with a sprawling garden he tended himself. It was the house he and Clara had built, not just lived in. He had designed every inch of it. As he walked inside, the silence that Mark found so pitiable wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like the silence of a waiting room, the quiet before a diagnosis. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't continue like this. The ritual had become a humiliation, and the promise had become a chain. The origin of the $500 was rooted in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. Clara, her body frail but her eyes still holding their fierce intelligence, had gripped Liam's hand. Her voice was a dry whisper, a shadow of its former vibrancy. "Promise me you'll look after Chloe," she had said, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. "She tries so hard, but she's fragile. The world is too sharp for her. She needs someone to soften the edges." Liam, his heart a raw, open wound, had promised without hesitation. He would have promised her the moon and the stars. At the time, he saw Chloe through Clara's eyes, a delicate younger sister who had always lived in Clara's formidable shadow, struggling to find her footing. Clara had been the brilliant, grounded one, a successful botanist with a passion for obscure ferns and a laugh that could fill a room. Chloe had drifted from one low-paying job to another, always talking about her grand ambitions, but never seeming to make any headway. When Clara passed, Liam's grief was a vast, empty landscape. Keeping his promise was the only landmark he had left. The first payment had been sent a month after the funeral. Chloe had called him, sobbing, about an unexpected car repair she couldn't afford. Without a second thought, Liam had wired her the money. The next month, it was a dental emergency. The month after, a threat of eviction. It soon became a regular occurrence, a pattern of perpetual crisis on her end and quiet assistance on his. After 6 months, Liam proposed the monthly stipend. "Let's just make it $500 a month," he'd said gently over the phone. "That way you have a safety net. You don't have to call me for every little thing. Just know it's there." Chloe had accepted with a tearful gratitude that, at the time, felt entirely genuine. For the first year, it felt right. It felt like he was honoring Clara. But as time went on, the dynamics shifted. The gratitude was replaced by expectation, and the expectation by a subtle, creeping disdain. They would invite him for dinner, ostensibly to thank him, but the evenings became showcases for their slowly improving lifestyle. First, it was a new television. Then, new furniture. Then, Mark traded his sensible sedan for a luxury SUV. They always had a story to accompany the acquisitions, a small bonus Mark received, a lucky investment, a gift from a relative. The narrative of their struggle remained firmly in place, even as the evidence mounted against it. Last spring, the humiliation had become more overt. He'd arrived at their house for a weekend barbecue to find them in the midst of a landscaping project. "Liam, perfect timing," Mark had boomed, clapping him on the back. "Be a good lad and give us a hand with these paving stones, will you? My back is killing me." For 3 hours under the hot sun, Liam had hauled heavy stones and dug trenches, while Mark supervised from a lounge chair with a cold beer. Chloe had brought him a glass of water once, remarking, "It's good to get your hands dirty, isn't it?" Builds character. He had driven home that day with blisters on his hands and a cold knot of anger in his stomach. He was no longer a brother-in-law, he was the help. What they never knew, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was the sheer scale of their misjudgment. They saw Liam, the quiet, unassuming architect who worked from a home office and drove a 10-year-old car. They thought he was a mid-level draftsman earning a modest salary. They had no concept of the truth. Liam wasn't an employee, he was an owner. He was the silent founding partner of Nexus Design, one of the most innovative and successful architectural firms in the country. After Clara's death, shattered by grief, he had stepped away from the public eye, handing the day-to-day operations and the CEO title to his trusted friend and partner, Arthur Vance. Liam retained a 60% ownership stake and the title of Chief Design Architect. He worked from home by choice, taking on only the projects that truly inspired him, the massive, legacy-defining projects, the ones that won prestigious awards and shaped city skylines. His modest life was a conscious decision, a shield against a world that suddenly felt too loud, too garish, after Clara was gone. His wealth was vast, passive, and managed by a team of professionals. The $500 he sent Chloe every month was, to his portfolio, less than a rounding error. It was the interest on his interest. That night, after the demeaning dinner, he sat at his oak desk, the place where the ritual usually happened. But instead of a checkbook, he opened his laptop. The screen illuminated his face, casting long shadows in the quiet room. He bypassed the simple interface for his personal accounts and logged into the encrypted network of his private wealth management firm. Charts, graphs, and strings of numbers filled the screen. He clicked on a file labeled Azure Tower, Phase 2. A breathtaking 3D rendering of a skyscraper filled the screen, a twisting column of glass and steel that seemed to defy gravity. It was his latest project, a billion-dollar development set to redefine the city's downtown core. He had been working on the design for 18 months. He felt a grim irony wash over him. While Mark and Chloe were condescending to him about the cost of wine, he was orchestrating the creation of something that would be a permanent part of the world long after they were all gone. He looked away from the screen, his eyes landing on the small, silver-framed photo of Clara on his desk. Her smile was bright, her eyes full of life. "I promised to look after her, Clara," he whispered to the photograph. "But what if I've been doing it all wrong?" The discovery, when it came, was not a dramatic confrontation or a whispered confession. It was mundane, accidental, and utterly devastating. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Liam was taking a break from a complex structural analysis of the Azure Tower's cantilevered observation deck. He was scrolling through a local news site, catching up on community events, when a headline caught his eye. "Starlight Gala raises record funds for Children's Hospital." He clicked, scanning the article with mild interest. His firm was a major benefactor of the hospital, though he always made his donations anonymously. He scrolled down to the photo gallery at the bottom of the page. Dozens of pictures showcased the city's elite in their finest attire, smiling for the camera, their generosity on full display. And then he saw them. They weren't in the foreground. They were in the background of a photo of the mayor, slightly out of focus, but unmistakable. It was Mark and Chloe. Mark was laughing, a flute of champagne in his hand, looking entirely at home amongst the city's most powerful figures. And Chloe was radiant. She was wearing a shimmering, deep blue gown, a complex creation of silk and sequins that clung to her figure. It was a stunning dress, a designer dress. Liam, as an architect, had a keen eye for design and form, whether in buildings or fashion. He recognized the signature style. He zoomed in. The cut, the fabric, the intricate beading. It was a Veronique Dubois. He knew the name because the designer had recently collaborated with an interior design firm Nexus had worked with. Her gowns were not just expensive, they were couture, pieces of art that cost a small fortune. A strange, unnatural calm settled over Liam. There was no rage, no shock, just a profound and sudden clarity, as if a dirty window he'd been staring through for 5 years had just been wiped clean. He right-clicked the image and saved it to his desktop. He opened a new browser tab and typed, Veronique Dubois blue sequin gown. The search results were immediate. There it was, on a luxury retailer's website, the Midnight Ocean gown. He clicked the link. The price appeared on the screen, stark and obscene. $3,500. 7 months. 7 months of the money he sent her, believing she needed it for groceries, for rent, for the basic necessities of a life she found so challenging. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silent room. The entire narrative, the 5 years of struggle, the constant crises, the tearful gratitude, it all collapsed in on itself, revealing the rotten, hollow space within. It wasn't a struggle, it was a performance. And he had been the sole, dedicated audience member. The cold calm did not dissipate. It solidified, hardening into something sharp and resolute. This was no longer about a broken promise or wounded pride. This was about a profound and deliberate deception, a mockery of his grief, of Clara's memory. He closed the web browser and opened a different program, a secure access portal to a service he rarely used. It was a discreet, private investigation firm that his company kept on retainer to perform due diligence on potential business partners. He typed a new directive into the system. The subjects, Chloe and Mark Anderson. The objective, a complete financial and lifestyle analysis. He requested access to public records, credit reports, social media archives, and any available asset information. He clicked Execute, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. He minimized the window and stared at the photo of Chloe in her expensive dress. He thought of her condescending tone, of Mark's patronizing advice, of the blisters he'd gotten laying their patio stones. They had not just taken his money, they had taken his kindness and twisted it into a joke at his expense. They had feasted on his goodwill. The investigation would take a few days. He knew what he would do with the information. It would not be loud or explosive. It would be quiet, methodical, and precise. It would be like his architecture, a carefully constructed plan where every single element served a specific, undeniable purpose. The foundation of their false life was about to be tested, and Liam knew, with an architect's certainty, that it would not hold. Liam did not change his routine. The next morning he woke at his usual time, tended to his garden, and then settled in at his desk to work. The gears of the investigation were turning in the background, a silent, invisible machine digging through the carefully constructed facade of the Andersons' life. To an outside observer, Liam was the same, but inside a fundamental shift had occurred. The grief and sense of obligation that had clouded his judgment for 5 years had evaporated, replaced by the crystalline focus of a man with a singular, unyielding purpose. He sent no angry texts. He made no accusatory phone calls. He simply waited. And he planned. 2 days later, a comprehensive report was uploaded to his secure portal. It was a digital monument to deceit. He spent 3 hours reading it, his expression unreadable. The findings were worse than he had imagined. Chloe and Mark were drowning in debt, but it was the debt of indulgence, not hardship. The report detailed their lavish spending, weekly dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, weekend trips to luxury spas, a subscription to a high-end wine club. They had 2 car payments, both for top-of-the-line models, totaling over $2,000 a month. Their mortgage on their oversized house was crippling, but most damning of all was the detailed breakdown of Mark's finances. Mark's job as a senior investment manager at Sterling Cole Financial was, in fact, a commission-based brokerage position. His income was wildly inconsistent, dependent on high-risk trades. The reports showed that he was dangerously over-leveraged, using client funds in speculative ventures that bordered on professional misconduct. He was playing a desperate game, projecting an image of immense success to attract wealthy clients, while his own financial situation was a house of cards in a hurricane. Liam's $500 a month was not, as Chloe had claimed, bridging the gaps. It was their entertainment budget. It was their wine subscription. It was the cash they used for valet parking and overpriced cocktails, the petty cash that funded the small details of their grand illusion. Liam closed the file and swiveled his chair to face the small, silver-framed photograph of Clara. He picked it up, his thumb stroking the cool glass over her smiling face. "You were worried about her character, weren't you?" he said softly to the image. "Not her bank account." Clara had seen the flaw, the crack in her sister's foundation. She had seen the desperate need for external validation, the emptiness that Chloe tried to fill with things. And he, in his grief-stricken haze, had misinterpreted her dying wish. He thought he was supposed to provide the materials to patch the cracks. He realized now that his promise wasn't to endlessly supply Chloe with plaster for her facade. It was to ensure the integrity of her structure. By enabling her deceit, he had failed. He hadn't been looking after her, he had been indulging her sickness. His new mission was clear. It was not about revenge, not in the petty sense. It was about correction. It was about fulfilling the true spirit of his promise to Clara. He would not allow her memory to be an excuse for this parasitic charade. He would introduce Chloe and Mark to a concept they had long forgotten: consequence. With his decision made, he picked up his phone. He didn't call Chloe or Mark. He called Arthur Vance, the CEO and public face of Nexus Design. Arthur, a bluff, brilliant man in his late 60s with a booming laugh, was one of the few people who knew the full extent of Liam's situation. "Liam, to what do I owe the honor?" Arthur's voice crackled over the line. "Don't tell me you're finally ready to come back to the office and deal with the quarterly budget meetings." Liam allowed himself a small smile. "Not a chance, Arthur. I need a favor." "Anything, you know that. What is it? You want me to buy a small country and install you as its benevolent architect king?" "Something a little more local," Liam said, his voice losing its light tone. "There's a project your team is involved with, the financing for the Azure Tower. Of course, it's your masterpiece. The board is ecstatic. We're in the final stages of vetting the financial partners. There's a firm, Sterling Cole Financial. A man named Mark Anderson is the broker on the account." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Anderson, Clara's brother-in-law?" Arthur asked, his voice now serious. He had been at the wedding. He remembered Mark as a slick, overly confident young man. "The very same," Liam confirmed. "I need you to do two things for me. First, I want you to send a formal invitation to Mark. Invite him to a final partnership dinner. The venue will be the observatory, private dining room. The host will be the chief design architect of Nexus Design." Arthur let out a low whistle. The observatory was notoriously exclusive, and Liam hadn't made a public appearance as a representative of Nexus in 5 years. That will certainly get his attention. He'll think he's about to close the biggest deal of his life. What's the second thing? I want you to schedule a full, deep dive audit of Sterling Cole's proposal, and specifically of Mark Anderson's portfolio management. Use the independent firm we used for the Zurich acquisition. I want it to be rigorous, Arthur. By the book, and I want the preliminary findings on my desk before the dinner. "Consider it done, Liam," Arthur said, a note of grim understanding in his voice. "I take it the gloves are coming off." "The gloves have been off for a long time, Arthur," Liam replied, looking at Clara's photo. "I'm just finally ready to start punching back." He hung up the phone. The chessboard was set. The pieces were in motion. The first move had been made. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday, thick cream-colored cardstock embossed with the Nexus Design logo in subtle silver foil. Chloe's hands trembled slightly as she read it. An invitation to a private dinner at the observatory, the restaurant perched atop the city's tallest building, a place so exclusive it was spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. It was hosted by the mysterious, seldom-seen chief design architect of Nexus Design, the genius behind the Azure Tower project. And it was addressed to Mark. "This is it, Chloe, this is it." Mark was pacing their living room, a whirlwind of triumphant energy. "I knew it. They're signing off. The deal is closed. This is the biggest commission of my life. We're not just back, baby, we're on a whole new level." Chloe felt a dizzying surge of elation. The crushing weight of their debts, the constant juggling of payments, the fear of it all collapsing. It was all about to vanish. "The chief design architect," she breathed, tracing the elegant script with her finger. "No one's seen him in years. They say he's a total recluse. Mark, this is huge." Their excitement was so all-consuming that they barely registered the oddity of the second invitation, a simple, printed note included in the same envelope. It was an invitation for Liam. "Mr. Anderson is welcome to bring his brother-in-law, Mr. Liam Hale, as his guest." "That's strange," Chloe said, frowning. "Why would they invite Liam?" Mark scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "It's a courtesy, a family thing. Someone in their HR department probably saw my file, noted I have a local brother-in-law, and added him as a +1. It's a corporate gesture. Means nothing," he grinned. "Besides, it's perfect. Let the poor guy see how the other half lives for a night. It'll be a treat for him." And so, Liam was summoned. Chloe called him, her voice dripping with a magnanimous excitement that set his teeth on edge. "Liam, you are not going to believe the most wonderful news. Mark has closed the deal of a lifetime, and we've been invited to a celebratory dinner at the observatory. And they've been so thoughtful. They said we could bring you along. You have to come. You've been so good to us, we want you to share in our success." "The observatory," Liam said, his voice carefully neutral. "That sounds very impressive." "Oh, it is," Chloe gushed. "Don't worry about what to wear, just put on your best suit. This is a big night for the family, Liam, a really big night." On the evening of the dinner, Liam stood before the mirror in his bedroom. He wasn't wearing his usual tweed jacket or comfortable corduroys. He had chosen a suit, but it was not the slightly too large, off-the-rack one he usually wore to weddings and funerals, the one Chloe had once called charming in a vintage way. This was a bespoke suit of deep charcoal wool, tailored to perfection. It was understated, elegant, and had cost more than Mark's flashy, brand-name ensemble. He paired it with a simple white shirt and a dark silk tie. He looked like what he was, a man of quiet, immense substance. He drove to their house to pick them up, as they had insisted on arriving together, a united family front. When he pulled up, Mark looked his car up and down. "You know, Liam, after tonight, we're going to get you into a new car. My treat. We can't have my brother-in-law driving this rust bucket." Liam just smiled. "It gets me where I need to go." The ride to the observatory was filled with their giddy chatter. They were already spending Mark's commission, planning a kitchen renovation and a second vacation, this time to the Maldives. Liam remained silent, a placid island in their sea of manic excitement. As they stepped into the private elevator that ascended directly to the restaurant, Chloe gave Liam's suit an appraising look. "Well, look at you," she said, surprised. "You clean up nicely." The elevator doors opened into a space of breathtaking opulence. The walls were dark wood and brushed bronze. The lighting was low and intimate, and one entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a glittering panorama of the city below. A maitre d' with the posture of a retired general approached them. "Good evening. Welcome to the observatory." "Good evening," Mark said, puffing out his chest. "We're here for the Nexus Design dinner. Anderson." The maitre d' did not smile. He simply consulted his tablet. "Ah, yes, the private dining room. The host has already arrived. This way, please." He led them through the hushed main dining room, where every table seemed occupied by people of immense importance, to a set of large, ornate doors. He opened one, revealing a secluded room with its own panoramic window. A single large round table was set for three, and sitting at the table, calmly sipping a glass of water as he looked out at the city lights, was Liam. He turned as they entered, a polite, almost serene expression on his face. "Chloe, Mark, glad you could make it. Please have a seat." Mark and Chloe froze in the doorway, their triumphant smiles faltering, replaced by utter confusion. Mark looked from Liam to the maitre d' and back again. "There must be some mistake," he stammered. "We're here to meet the chief design architect of Nexus." The maitre d' gave a slight, almost imperceptible bow in Liam's direction. "The chief architect is here, sir." Liam gestured to the chairs opposite him. On the table, next to his water glass, sat a simple, elegant folder bound in dark brown leather. "There's no mistake, Mark," Liam said, his voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight in the silent room. "I'm the one who invited you. Please, sit. We have a lot to talk about." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint, distant hum of the city below. Chloe and Mark stood paralyzed in the doorway, their faces a mask of disbelief. Mark's jaw worked silently, as if he were trying to form words that his brain refused to supply. Chloe's eyes darted from Liam to the opulent surroundings and back to Liam, her expression one of a person questioning their own sanity. "Liam, what is this? What's going on?" Chloe finally managed, her voice a thin, reedy thing. "Is this some kind of joke?" "I don't have much of a sense of humor, Chloe. You've told me that yourself many times," Liam replied, his tone still unnervingly calm. He gestured again to the empty chairs. "Sit down. The waiter will be here to take our order soon. Their sea bass is excellent." The sheer normalcy of the statement seemed to break their paralysis. Slowly, hesitantly, as if walking on a frozen lake, they moved to the table and sat down. Mark looked like a man who had just been slapped. He kept looking toward the door, as if expecting the real host to appear at any moment. A waiter entered, silent and efficient, and poured them water. He handed them menus bound in the same leather as Liam's folder. Mark and Chloe stared at theirs blankly. Liam didn't open his. "I've taken the liberty of pre-ordering a few appetizers for the table," he said to the waiter, who simply nodded and departed. Liam then folded his hands on the table, his gaze steady and direct. He looked first at Chloe, then at Mark. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately," he began, his voice level, "and about promises. The promises we make to the people we love, especially the ones who aren't with us anymore." Chloe flinched at the mention of Clara. It was a tactic she often used, but hearing it from him, in this context, felt different. It felt like a warning. "I've also been thinking about respect," Liam continued, his eyes locking onto Mark's. "It's a funny thing. Some people think it comes with a title, or a car, or the price of the wine you order. They think it can be demanded, but it can't. It has to be earned, and it's so easily lost." Mark was beginning to recover his bluster, mistaking Liam's calm for weakness. "Liam, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not funny. We're here for a very important business meeting." "We are," Liam agreed. "This is the most important business meeting of your life, Mark. You just misunderstood who it was with." The appetizers arrived. A delicate arrangement of seared scallops, a plate of artisanal cheeses, and a complex-looking tart. Chloe and Mark stared at the food as if it were alien. Liam ignored the plates. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping a notch, becoming more intimate, more chilling. "I've kept a sort of mental ledger for the past 5 years. Little moments. On May 14th, 2 years ago, you called my car a rust bucket, Mark. Last Christmas, Chloe, you told me my suit was charming in a vintage way. which we both know was your polite way of calling it old and cheap. 3 months ago, you had me spend 4 hours laying paving stones in your backyard so you wouldn't have to hire a laborer. He paused. You see, I remember everything. He was reciting these facts not with anger, but with the dispassionate precision of an auditor reviewing a fraudulent account. Each memory, each small slight, landed in the silent room like a stone dropped into a still pond. The color was draining from Chloe's face. Mark's bravado was crumbling, revealing the raw panic beneath. What do you want, Liam? Chloe whispered. Liam's eyes found hers. I want to talk about your dress, he said softly. My dress? The one you wore to the Starlight Gala for the Children's Hospital a few weeks ago. The Veronique Dubois. Midnight Ocean, I believe it's called. He reached over and tapped the leather folder, but didn't open it yet. It was a beautiful gown, really stunning. Chloe looked as if he had struck her. Her breath hitched. That gala was their secret, a part of the life they lived away from the prying, pitying eyes of her charitable brother-in-law. How did you, she started. Liam calmly slid a single, high-resolution photograph across the polished table. It was the picture from the news site, zoomed in and printed on glossy paper. Chloe and Mark, laughing, champagne in hand, the picture of success. It costs, if I'm not mistaken, Liam said, his voice a quiet hammer blow, $3,500. He let the number hang in the air for a moment. Or to put it another way, 7 months. 7 months of the little contribution you told me was helping you bridge the gaps. 7 months of the money I gave you, believing you were struggling, believing I was honoring my promise to your sister. The power dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it inverted with the force of a tidal wave. The quiet, pitiable Liam they had cultivated in their minds for 5 years dissolved, and in his place sat a man they didn't know at all. A man who was calm, collected, and held all the cards. Mark stared at the photograph, then at Liam, a dawning horror spreading across his features. The dinner wasn't a celebration, it was a tribunal, and it had only just begun. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, a gesture of shock that was, for the first time in a long time, entirely genuine. Mark's face, which had cycled through confusion and irritation, finally settled on a waxy, pale shade of fear. The carefully constructed world they had built, a world of illusion funded by debt and deceit, was beginning to fracture right before their eyes. Liam, we can explain, Chloe stammered, her voice trembling. It was a gift, an old friend. She lent it to me for the night. It wasn't. Liam raised a hand, a simple, silencing gesture that carried more authority than any shout. Please, Chloe, don't. Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else. Let's not add more lies to the pile. It's already so tall. He slowly, deliberately opened the leather folder. It wasn't filled with architectural drawings. It was a portfolio of their lives. He slid the top sheet across the table. It was a summary of their credit card statements for the last 12 months, categorized and totaled. Dining, $28,450. Travel and leisure, $19,200. Luxury goods, $14,800. Things are just so tight right now, Liam quoted, his voice devoid of emotion. He looked at Mark. You're a numbers guy, Mark. Do these look like the numbers of a struggling family? Mark stared at the paper, his mouth agape. It was his life, quantified and laid bare on a single sheet. He felt a wave of nausea. Where did you get this? This is private information. You can't just... I can, Liam said simply, cutting him off. And I did. When you lie to me, when you take advantage of my goodwill, a goodwill born from a promise to my dying wife, you forfeit your right to privacy from me. The deception was the invitation, Mark. This is the conversation. He removed the credit card summary and revealed the next page. It was a detailed analysis of Mark's investment portfolio. Red lines and cautionary notes highlighted his high-risk, over-leveraged positions. At the bottom was a summary paragraph written in stark, unforgiving language, detailing the extreme risk to his client's capital and his firm's reputation. "I had my people look into your work at Sterling Cole," Liam said, his gaze as cold and hard as polished granite. "They were not impressed. Reckless, unethical, a catastrophic liability. Those were some of the words they used. And then came the quiet bomb, the one that would shatter their world completely." Liam turned his calm, assessing gaze back to Mark. "You've been working tirelessly to secure the financing partnership for the Azure Tower project, haven't you? You told Chloe it was the deal of a lifetime, the biggest commission you'd ever see." Mark nodded mutely, his eyes wide with terror. He was beginning to connect the dots, and the picture they formed was a nightmare. "It's a beautiful design," Liam said, a flicker of something, pride perhaps, in his eyes for the first time that night. A twisting column of glass and steel, cantilevered observation decks, a net-zero energy footprint, a true legacy project. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I should know. I designed it." The words landed with no force, yet they hit with the power of a physical blow. Chloe gasped, her mind reeling. Mark just stared, his entire body rigid. "My firm, Nexus Design, holds the architectural contract and all associated intellectual property rights," Liam continued, his voice the calm center of their collapsing universe. "And as the 60% majority owner, and yes, the reclusive chief design architect," he let the title hang in the air, the very title that had been the source of their giddy excitement just an hour before. "I have final say on all major contractors, including financial partners." It was over. In that single, devastating revelation, 5 years of condescension, of mockery, of petty cruelties were rendered absurd. They hadn't been patronizing a poor, simple-minded relative. They had been biting the very hand that was, without their knowledge, orchestrating the single greatest opportunity of their lives. The irony was so immense, so crushing, it was almost poetic. The dam of their composure finally broke. The arrogance, the pride, the carefully maintained facade, it all washed away in a flood of pure, desperate panic. "Liam, no!" Chloe pleaded, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. "Please, we're sorry. We are so, so sorry. We were stupid. We were wrong. Please don't do this." Mark, the master of the universe, the stock market wizard, slumped in his chair, a broken man. "Liam, please," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I can fix it. I'll pay you back, every cent, with interest. Just don't take this deal away from me. It's everything. It's my entire career." Their pleading was raw, pathetic. They were no longer the arrogant elite, the connoisseurs of fine wine and luxury travel. They were just two terrified people staring into the abyss, an abyss they had dug for themselves and had just been pushed toward. Liam watched them, his face a mask of detached observation. He felt no pleasure in their terror, no thrill of victory. He only felt a profound, hollow sadness. A sadness for them, for what their lives had become, and a deep, aching sadness for Clara, whose memory they had so thoroughly defiled. He let them plead for a full minute, their apologies and excuses tumbling over each other in a desperate torrent. Then he spoke. The torrent of apologies and pleas eventually slowed to a trickle of desperate sobs from Chloe and a stunned, hollow silence from Mark. They waited, their fates hanging on the next words from the man they had so grievously underestimated. Liam took a slow sip of his water, the sound of the glass touching the table echoing in the tense room. His face was not one of anger or triumph. It was one of grim resolution. "The monthly payments stop, obviously," he said. The statement so simple and final, it was like closing a book. That part of our relationship is over. The money was never the point, but its absence will be a consequence. He turned his attention to Mark, who looked up, his eyes pleading. As for the Azure Tower project, Liam continued, your involvement is terminated, effective immediately. Tomorrow morning, Arthur Vance, the CEO of Nexus Design, will be informing the board of Sterling Coal that we are exercising our right to refuse a partnership based on the reckless and unethical portfolio management of their lead broker. The audit my team performed will be submitted as evidence. Mark's face went white. This was worse than just losing the commission. This was career annihilation. An accusation like that, coming from a client as powerful as Nexus and backed by a forensic audit, wouldn't just lose him the deal. It would get him fired. It would get him blacklisted. No, Mark whispered. Liam, you can't. That's my whole life. You built your life on a foundation of lies, Mark, Liam said, his voice cutting. A foundation I helped pay for. The lies stop now. You will face the consequences of your own choices. That is how the world works, outside of the fantasy you've been living in. He then turned his gaze to Chloe. Her tears had subsided, replaced by a look of utter despair. She looked smaller, stripped of her designer clothes and arrogant posture, just a frightened woman in a very expensive restaurant. Clara, Liam began, and Chloe flinched as if he'd struck her. When Clara asked me to look after you, I thought she meant financially. I was a fool. Clara was the smartest person I ever knew. She wasn't worried about your bank account. She was worried about your character. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. She saw this. She saw the emptiness in you, the desperate need to project an image of a life you weren't living, the belief that your worth was tied to what you owned, not who you were. I thought I was helping you fill a financial hole. I see now I was just feeding the void, making it bigger. My promise to her wasn't to enable your self-destruction. It was to protect you from it. I failed in that. Tonight, I correct my mistake. The moral mirror he held up was brutal and unflinching. Chloe crumpled under the weight of the reflection, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. So here is what will happen, Liam stated, his tone shifting from diagnosis to prescription. You will sell the house. You will sell the cars. You will sell the jewelry and the designer clothes. You will pay off the mountain of debt you have accumulated. You will learn to live within your means. You will learn to live honestly. He paused, letting the stark reality of his decree sink in. It was a complete teardown of their existence. Then he offered a single, unexpected lifeline. I will not see you on the street, he said, looking at Chloe. That would dishonor Clara's memory as much as your deceit has. So I will offer you one, and only one, piece of assistance. He slid another piece of paper from the folder. It was a job description. My firm is a primary benefactor for the Downtown Hope Shelter, a charity that does real work for people in real crisis. They have an opening for an entry-level administrative assistant. The pay is modest, the work is difficult, but it is honest work. It is a chance to build something real for the first time in your life. The position is yours, Chloe, if you want it. He looked at her, his expression serious. It's a choice. You can take it and begin the hard work of building a life of integrity, or you can refuse it and face the world with nothing. The choice is yours. Then he turned back to Mark, whose face was a canvas of shock. He was likely expecting a similar offer, a path to redemption. And for you, Mark, Liam said, his voice flat and final, I offer nothing. Nothing but the direct and unavoidable consequences of your actions. You are a predator who used my family's tragedy for personal gain. You will find no charity from me. He stood up, placing his napkin neatly on the table. The expensive appetizers lay untouched. The meal is paid for. Feel free to stay and enjoy the view. He looked down at them, two broken figures in a gilded cage. I hope for your sakes you learn something from it. Without another word, Liam turned and walked out of the private dining room, leaving them alone with the glittering city lights, the untouched food, and the smoking ruins of their lives. The silence he left behind was heavier and more profound than any he had ever experienced in his quiet, peaceful home. The weeks that followed the dinner at the observatory were a slow, grinding process of dismantlement for Chloe and Mark. Liam's predictions unfolded with the grim certainty of a prophecy. The day after the dinner, Mark was summoned to an emergency meeting with the board of Sterling Coal. By noon, he was escorted from the building, a cardboard box in his hands, his career not just over, but incinerated. The official reason was gross professional misconduct. The unofficial reason spread through the city's financial circles like wildfire. He had tried to swindle the reclusive billionaire architect of Nexus Design. No firm would touch him. The for sale sign went up in front of their sprawling, minimalist house a week later. The luxury cars were repossessed. Their circle of friends, a group built on the shallow foundations of perceived wealth and status, evaporated overnight. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations ceased. They were social pariahs, ghosts haunting the life they had pretended to live. They moved into a small, two-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of town, the kind of place they would have openly mocked just months earlier. The silence in their new, cramped living room was not peaceful. It was suffocating, filled with unspoken resentments and the bitter taste of failure. Mark, stripped of his identity as a high-flying financier, descended into a spiral of anger and self-pity. He spent his days applying for jobs he was wildly overqualified for on paper, but temperamentally unsuited for in reality. His arrogance and sense of entitlement poisoning every interview. He blamed Liam. He blamed Chloe. He blamed the world. He blamed everyone but himself. Chloe, however, was on a different path. After a week of shock and despair, she had made a choice. With trembling hands, she had called the number on the job description Liam had left her. She had taken the entry-level position at the downtown Hope Shelter. The first few weeks were a special kind of hell. The work was grueling. The pay was a fraction of what she used to spend on a single pair of shoes, and her colleagues were overworked, no-nonsense people who had no time for her former pretensions. She was humbled, resentful, and utterly miserable. She, who had once debated the merits of saltwater infinity pools, was now filing paperwork for people who had slept on the street the night before. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, something began to change. She listened to the stories of the people who came through the shelter's doors, stories of real crisis, real loss, and incredible resilience. She saw what true struggle looked like, and it bore no resemblance to her manufactured narrative of being so tight right now. She worked alongside people who dedicated their lives to helping others, not for status or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. For the first time, she was surrounded by genuine character, and the contrast with the life she had led was stark and shameful. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, she sat alone in her small apartment, Mark having stormed out after another fight. She found a piece of paper and a pen. She began to write a letter to Liam. It was not a plea for more help or a demand for forgiveness. It was something far more difficult. It was an admission. She wrote about her emptiness, her jealousy of Clara's effortless confidence, and the desperate, pathetic need she'd had to feel important. She acknowledged the depth of her deception and the disrespect she had shown to Clara's memory. She didn't ask for his forgiveness. She ended the letter with two simple words: "Thank you." It was the first truly honest thing she had communicated in years. Meanwhile, Liam found a new, quieter kind of peace. He had moved on. He poured his energy into the Azure Tower, its soaring lines a monument to his renewed sense of purpose. He spoke with Arthur Vance regularly, not just about work, but as a friend. Arthur had confirmed Mark's professional demise and, more recently, had passed on a surprising piece of news. The director of the downtown Hope Shelter, a woman Arthur knew from his own philanthropic work, had called to mention their new administrative assistant. She said the woman, Chloe Anderson, was a mess when she started, Arthur had relayed to Liam over the phone. But she's tough. She's learning. The director thinks she might actually have something to her. One afternoon, Liam was in his study when the mail arrived. Among the bills and architectural magazines was a simple, hand-addressed envelope. He recognized Chloe's handwriting. He opened it and read her letter. He felt no sense of triumph, no satisfaction at her confession. He just felt a quiet, aching sadness, and for the first time, a flicker of hope for her. He walked over to his desk and picked up Clara's photograph. "She's starting to find her way," he whispered. I think this is what you wanted." He had not just avenged a wrong. He had, in the most painful way possible, fulfilled the true, unspoken depth of his promise. He had looked after Chloe, not by shielding her from the world, but by finally forcing her to live in it. A year passed. The Azure Tower was nearing completion, a new icon on the city's skyline. Liam, while still preferring his privacy, had started to re-engage more with the world. He attended board meetings, mentored young architects at his firm, and found a quiet satisfaction in his work that had been missing for years. The sharp edges of his grief for Clara had softened, leaving behind a warm, enduring love. One crisp autumn evening, he found himself attending a small fundraising event. It wasn't a glitzy gala like the one that had started it all, but a modest, heartfelt affair held in a repurposed warehouse, organized by and for the downtown Hope Shelter. He was there as an anonymous supporter, content to observe from the back of the room. The event was simple, elegant, and incredibly effective. The stories shared were powerful, the appeals genuine. It was clear that the person who had organized it had a keen eye for detail and a deep understanding of the mission. As the event was winding down, he saw her. Chloe was standing near the exit, speaking with the shelter's director. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple, professional dress. Her hair was styled simply. The hard, brittle shell of arrogance was gone, and in its place was a quiet confidence, a poise that came not from what she owned, but from what she did. She laughed at something the director said, and for the first time, Liam saw a genuine spark of her sister's warmth in her eyes. She saw him then. Her smile faltered for a moment, and a flicker of the old shame crossed her face. But it was fleeting. She excused herself and walked toward him, not with the pleading desperation of that night at the observatory, but with the steady gait of an equal. "Liam," she said, her voice even, "I didn't know you were coming." "I support the shelter," he replied simply. "You did a wonderful job. The event is a great success." "Thank you," she said, and this time the words were not from a letter, but from her heart. "I had a lot of help." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. The house, the cars, the lies, the confrontation, it was all there. "How is Mark?" Liam asked, not out of malice, but genuine, if distant, curiosity. Chloe's expression tightened for a fraction of a second. "We divorced 6 months ago," she said. He couldn't accept the new reality. He moved out of state, looking for a fresh start. "I hope he finds it." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a sad finality. "I'm sorry, Liam," she said, looking him directly in the eye. "For everything. I know saying sorry doesn't change what I did, but I need to say it anyway. I was a terrible person." Liam looked at the woman standing before him. She was not the same person he had sat opposite in that opulent dining room. That woman was gone. This was someone new, someone forged in the fires of humiliation and hard work. He saw the first glimmerings of the person Clara had always hoped she could be. "Clara was always worried about you," Liam said softly. "She wanted you to be happy, truly happy, not just pretending to be." Tears welled in Chloe's eyes, but she did not let them fall. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what that means," she whispered. Liam nodded slowly. He had not forgotten what she had done. The scars of her betrayal were real. But forgiveness, he was learning, wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting that the past could not be changed and choosing not to let it poison the future. He had wanted justice, and justice had been served. But now, seeing her here, whole and honest, he felt something else, a sense of peace, a sense of closure. "Good," he said, offering her a small, genuine smile. "I think she would be very proud of you tonight, Chloe." He left the event and walked out into the cool night air. Above him, the lights of the newly completed Azure Tower twinkled against the dark sky. His creation, a silent testament to structure, integrity, and enduring strength. He had kept his promise. Not the one he thought he had made in that sterile hospital room, but the real one, the one that lay beneath the words, in the heart of the woman he had loved. He had helped Chloe not by giving her what she wanted, but by giving her what she needed, a chance to tear down her life of lies and build something true in its place. Liam learned that true generosity isn't always about giving. Sometimes it's about taking away the things that prevent someone from growing. He discovered that true strength isn't just the power to dismantle a life, but the wisdom and compassion to offer a blueprint for building a new one. The path to redemption is not paved with easy apologies, but with the hard, honest work of becoming a better person. And so we ask you, what do you think? Was Liam's form of justice too harsh? Or was it the only thing that could have truly helped Chloe? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special. If this story of consequence and redemption resonated with you, please show your support by giving it a like and subscribing to our channel for more tales of life's intricate moral dilemmas. Thank you for joining us.